Chairman, our next witness, there's a change in the program, is witness 407 at page 31 of your bundle. And the witness is a former judge in Iran. At the time of disturbances in November 19, he was outside Iran. His testimony concerns the excesses of the government officials, the details of which was revealed to him by his former colleagues who are still a member of judiciary in and around the city of Tehran. Thank you very much, witness 407, for joining this hearing. The chairman will now swear you in.
Thank you, Mr. Witness, for agreeing to testify. Would you repeat after me, please? I do solemnly declare that I will speak the truth.
I solemnly declare to say the truth.
Mr. Witness, do you hear me?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Would you mind repeating after me, please? I do solemnly declare that I will speak the truth.
I solemnly declare to speak the truth.
Truth and nothing but the truth.
To speak the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
So that we are able to see the witness. At the moment, we can't.
We can see him here, but
okay. Thank you. There'll be questions, Mr. Witness, from the prosecution, and then there'll be questions from the panel.
For security reasons, the voice of the witness is repeated by a member of the council team. Witness 407, thank you very much for assisting this tribunal. Please inform the tribunal of the events that was relayed to you by the members of judiciary in Iran regarding the Aban incidents. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to ask for permission from the Honorable Court, Honorable Tribunal, on my own behalf and on behalf of all those who have been affected during Aban protests. I would like to express my sympathy to all those individuals, and I would also like to express my special gratitude to the panel of judges who have paved the way for the Iranian people to somehow seek justice and litigate the cases before the world. Before testifying, I need to state that whatever I'm going to say here is based on what I have heard from some competent individuals at those dates. As an introduction, I should say that as the honorable judges are aware, one of the basic rights in the civil society today, even in Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran, is that every individual should know about their charges. They should know exactly what their charges are. They should have a right to a lawyer. But unfortunately, we see that this is not always practiced. I should mention that I don't believe that any of those individuals who were killed at the time or injured or arrested were not really criminals. They had not committed any crimes. Rather, they were only asking for their basic rights. They were trying to have some peaceful protests only. And maybe this is beyond the scope of the scope of the activity of the court. Therefore, I will deal with the main issue. In those days, when the protests started, the security councils immediately held sessions at provincial levels and town levels. Based on what I heard and based on the volume of the protests, these security councils were being held beyond normal conditions, and their decisions led to the atrocities for which this court is being held. The security councils are part. I will explain about the Security Council to you. A Security Council, according to the law, is formed at the provincial level, at the town and at the governor level. It is being held of the Governor General, the governor, the political deputy of the province, the IRGC commander, the military commander, the head of the judiciary, the prosecutor of the province or the city where the Security Council is being held. Usually, the commander or the Governor General chairs the meeting, and according to the law, the Governor General or the governor will chair the Security Council. But unfortunately, during those days, the Governor Generals, the governors were practically only following the orders or were dictating the orders of the Ministry of Interior. And these orders were exactly referred to the field commanders, which were the IRGC commanders. And practically, the Security Council had lost its meaning. And according to one of the prosecutors who had said that the Security Council, the judges could have had a say in the Security Councils at normal conditions, but during those times of the protest, the judges had no permission to say anything, and they had to just follow orders, and they had to do whatever they were told by the Security Council. So the main aim of holding these Security Council meetings was to dictate orders to all the participants. As I mentioned, even when crimes are being committed, the individuals arrested, according to the Islamic Republic law, should be charged in a particular period of time set according to the law, and they should also be told what their sentence could be, and if people are being arrested for any reason, they should have been arrested based on the order of judicial officials, and if there is any case of entering the houses, the buildings where the individuals live, there should be warrants. But unfortunately, during the time of the protests, unfortunately, none of these were observed. The individuals who were arrested during protests, and also people who were arrested afterwards by the Basiji forces, IRGC, and sometimes the police, none of them were being told what their charges were. And for a long time, they were kept in prison without knowing what their charges were. I should say that a major part a major part of the system was not functioning, and in fact, the part that would charge them and would specify their charges had been taken away. They were not there at all. And the plainclothes officers, the police force, in fact, had got involved, and it wasn't clear whether in which department these plainclothes officers belonged to. And without paying any attention to the law on carrying weapons, we see that these individuals were shooting at people from close distance.
And in these protests, peaceful protests were shot at by these people. And unfortunately, it led to many casualties. Some were dead, some were injured in all parts of Iran. They were trying to they beat up those that were held in their detention centers, where they had influence. And that was part of what happened. And after the protests, there were times when the protests had quieted down, and without any orders or any warrants, but just based on what they had been told to do by the Security Council, to go around and beat up individuals. Or they would go to somebody's home and because they were suspicious that these are young people, and there's a probability that because they're young, they might take part in protests. And unfortunately, in these raids, even those who had not participated in any protests, or those who were members of families of the protesters, were harassed, and at times they were arrested. All those who were arrested, they were kept longer than the legal period that they should be kept there, without being formally charged and without having any. And they were kept in general detention centers, maybe in bigger cities. And they had over 100 people in these detention centers. They were kept in these detention centers. And in any way possible, they would they would deal with these people in any way they chose. Please urge the panel to use their to try and imagine over 100 people in a small detention center being kept without access to any basic facilities, without any of rules and regulations, observing any of these rules and regulations, without any of this. Just imagine how these people are, what state these people are in. I think that, unfortunately, this is I think I can say they were like missing in action, or they were like prisoners of war in a way, and that's how I find similarities. And I think they gave them themselves the right, that these people who were detained, because they called them rioters rather than protesters, that they can do whatever they will with these people based on the law. And it seems like they can give themselves, they have the prerogative to do whatever they want with these innocent people whose only crime was to take part in these protests because they wanted to express their demands. What they did was they would insult them, they would beat them up, they would swear at them, and similar atrocities. And there were all kinds of atrocities that were taking place in these detention centers in those days. And unfortunately, the world could not see any of that. And there was another, and I want to give you another instance, tell you about another event that took place. And I will quote one of my friends here. And he was a gentleman who told me that if the child of a family had taken part in a protest, and this young man was arrested by plainclothes officers, and it was the family told this gentleman to tell me that he said he was with us, and a plainclothes man came and arrested him. In fact, the family then had told the family that had happened, that he was with us and he was arrested. So the family worriedly went to the police station and they said, look, his friends have just come and told us he was arrested. So they went to the police station and the police did not give them any response. After a few years of following this up and searching everywhere to find their son, and they don't get anywhere. And after a week, they went and they found the body of the child in a mortuary, and they identified the body of the son. And the friends had told this family that the plainclothes man had arrested, and based on that, they went and filed a complaint. And they said, look, our son was probably killed as a result of in the protest. Maybe he was beaten up, but the medical examiner is saying that the death was as a result of something hard that had hit his head, a hard instrument. And but in view of the fact that it's difficult to identify plainclothes men, and even if they could be identified, but these branches are under IRGC, they paid no attention to the complaint of this family, and finally the case, because it was, and even before I came here to speak to you, I asked what had happened to that case, and I was told it is still open as a suspicious death, not as somebody who'd been killed in protest. They said, we have found the body of your son on the streets, but his friends had actually witnessed him being arrested and taken away by the authorities. And so it was most probable that it was in the detention center he was beaten in the head, and that is as a result of that beating he had died. But because his arrests were never registered, and we don't even know which detention center he was taken to, so at least we want to say, if he was detained, was there ever a charge? Let's even assume he had committed a crime. The family wanted to say, why was he accused? What was the charge against my son? And even assuming he was a crime and he's arrested, why was he beaten up? But unfortunately, there is no way for them to follow it up, because they don't even know what detention center he was taken to, and no one seems to accept responsibility. This was just an example to show you what the ruling system and our judiciary behaves in our country, and how they and I can tell you about the raids that took place. I just want to give you a picture of what the situation was like at the time of these protests. But now, if you have any questions, I'm at your disposal. Please do ask. I can give you a picture of what it was like. I want to speak to you about the judicial process. And in my several years of working in the judicial system, is that the judiciary is not independent, but it's part of the ruling system of the Islamic Republic, and whatever it does is to further the interests of the Islamic Republic, especially what the prosecutor and the judges, the way they are elected. It's as if, to all intents and purposes, it's like they just they have no will of their own, and they just obey what they are told. And in prosecutor's office, they have special departments that work directly with the IRGC and the intelligence ministry. Especially recently, IRGC intelligence has become more active in the judiciary. It's even stronger, especially since the November 2009. They exert the biggest influence in the judiciary, and those who work as interrogators they are in these departments are usually either work for the intelligence ministry or the IRGC intelligence ministry. They are not independent whatsoever, and whatever decision they make, it's what they have been told. They just obey what the authorities have told them. For instance, let's say somebody has been arrested, and according to the Penal Code of the Islamic Republic, there is you can temporarily detain somebody, and this is to do with the right to freedom. But unfortunately, because of the judiciary, when they issued arrest for somebody, they don't even have a right to have access to lawyers or anyone with a political belief. They were deprived of having a lawyer. They constantly issued warrants for temporary arrests, and these arrests keep continuing. And there are people who for 1 year are still being held on temporary detention, and no one knows of their fate. And even if a prosecutor decides to object to that, that prosecutor, be sure, will no longer be working, and he will be dealt with. So even the prosecutor must know who they should refer a person to, which interrogation department. And I tell you how the judiciary works in general. But if you have any specific issues, specific questions, please do ask me, and I'll do my best to answer.
So I take it you learned about the legal system in Iran when you were a lawyer, when you were studying there to be a lawyer, when you were studying law.
Could you please repeat your question?
I understand that you did learn about the legal system of Iran when you were a student at the university.
Well, yes, I read the Iranian law books and the laws related to the Iranian legal system.
Did you understand that the Iranian legal system was a just system?
Well, I told you, and I repeat, that procedurally speaking, the Iranian system is based on some advanced laws, and its laws are being extracted or being based on international law. So if our procedural law system is being implemented, the right of no defendant should be violated. But those who are implementing the law sometimes act against the law. And the individuals who are responsible to deal with such violations, and to make sure what violations are taking place in the legal system, they just ignore these violations. I will give you an example. There was an individual who has been detained after 24 hours. The individual should know about his charges. Like other countries, this is part of the legal system in Iran, but in Iran it might take a month, even longer. The person is being kept in the court without being charged. Even in case of ordinary crimes, we see this. In political cases, the situation is even worse. I just explained. This was one issue, of course, in connection to charges. Well, in connection to the laws that determine the sentences, there might be a law student, 20 years of age, who's learning about the law, has become familiar with the laws. Maybe that individual may not be quite familiar with the problems involved, especially the Islamic penal code. He might not pay much attention to the Islamic penal code when he is studying it, but after he gets into the details, he will realize that what practical problems there would be implementing these laws. There might be some shortcomings afterwards. In our law, in terms of the law of Lex Talion, and also the laws related to drinking alcohol, murder, and also homosexuality. There are some differences between our laws and the international laws, and certainly they are against the human rights laws. There are many cases where I can give you examples of this, but these topics are not related to the ambit of this court. Maybe it's not really necessary to explain them, but I can explain what happened, for example, in connection to a particular sentence, what sentence was issued, and what was implemented afterwards. We have such examples. All of us do have such examples. I've seen such examples in the judicial system. I also want to defend some of the decent judges. I should say that the least that a young judge may do, if he's a bit intellectual, is to be more careful. For example, in the Islamic Penal Code, it has been mentioned that if somebody confesses that he has drunk alcohol, that individual could be sentenced. Well, that judge may somehow tell the defendant, or may just interpret the laws in a narrow way and say that by confessing, you as a defendant are in fact leading yourself to punishment. So the judge may somehow help the defendant not to confess what he has done, and in such a way he could save the defendant from being punished. And in connection to the sentences issued, especially in connection to homosexuality, the judge may implement the part of the judgment. Maybe the judge would face problems after if he would not guide the defendant. he might be removed from his position gradually. But even in the same legal system, judiciary system, the judges may somehow help the defendants to be facing less severe sentences in civil cases.
Let me explain. I'm trying to understand, and I think it is important for us to understand the difference between what you learned the law was when you were at university and then the reality that you found. That's what I'm trying to get at. So in that context, and I hope you understand where I'm going to, in that context, let me say that when I was at university, we had the apartheid system. You must have heard about it. I'm sure you have. And I was a low-class student during the apartheid system. I had no vote or anything of the kind. And we learned how evil our system was. And some lecturers even told us privately how bad our system was. And we became lawyers to fix it. We didn't become lawyers to keep it. We became lawyers to fix it. Now that is the context in which I ask you, what happened to you at university, what you learned about the law, and what was your feeling after you learned about the justice system when you left there? And I'll leave it to you to explain to us, but I would, and I have a feeling all of us here would like to understand the gap between what you learn and what you did and how it all properly works. Because I'm sure you will agree with us, Judge, that this kind of context is very, very important for us to make a correct decision.
I fully agree with your opinion. There is a distance between what we learn at the university and what happens in practice. There is a gap between these two. Sometimes this gap is normal, and you just feel it. And it is not intentional. But when you see some individuals come and influence the system and act completely contrary to what the legal system should be, an individual comes and decides for the judicial system. So that would cause problem. And this is what we have seen in the past decades. And it is becoming worse. Our judicial system has no independence anymore today. The cases, especially for particular cases, the ones that you are dealing with here, the ones that you have held this tribunal for, you see that none of these cases go through the normal procedure. If these cases were dealt with properly, even if there was an offense committed, if the judicial system had been dealing with them properly, then the result could have been different. There has been no justice sought in the way the judicial system has acted. You can never see people objecting anywhere and then being taken to the court, and then the individual would say that I have been beaten and now my spinal cord has been severed. So the court does not deal with these issues, does not even want to address these issues, at least to make the individual a bit happy. But you don't see that. The judicial system in Iran is quite abnormal, inhuman, and unaccountable. Study certain things at the law school, Yes, of course. I said that there is a large volume of cases. We cannot deal with the issues properly because there are so many cases. A young judge has to face 30 cases a day, so naturally the judge cannot deal with the cases properly. That's a problem. That's a normal problem in the judicial system. But if the judge is not the lawmaker, is not the legislator, but the judge, if he is a bit fair, if he thinks of justice, he might help the defendant at certain times. He may consider justice, the people's rights when he deals with the cases. Assume that all our law students come and say that the Iranian laws violate human rights and we will not go to the judicial system. Then who should act to revise the system? That's what I had in mind. That's what we have in mind. I believe that in our judicial system, if the judges would think of justice even a little bit and to prevent the religious students to take over in the judicial system without having the competence, if we would be taking the positions in the courts, we might be able to help a bit. But now, unfortunately, I have come to the conclusion that that is not possible and time is against us. The public courts, the public courts have been closed down. The cases have been referred to specific courts. They are being, in fact, dealt at the various stages, and now even the multiple stage procedures have changed, and they are becoming a one-stage procedure, and so the system is just becoming really worse.
Is it permissible for me to begin, or?
Yes, please.
Oh.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. I have a few questions for you, not a whole number, but I would like to go back, and thank you for your testimony so far, by the way, because I was looking for a definition of exactly what the Security Council is, and you gave us a pretty good one, listing the kinds of individuals who serve on that council. And I'm not going to ask you for names, but I would like to know, are the names of the members of security councils from the various areas? Yeah, are they, is this information that's publicly available?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of? What's the last word in your question? The last couple of words. Asked about the Security Council.
Of security councils, is that information that's publicly available in Iran or on the net? Is this publicly available who the members are by name?
Yes, yes. Yes, I had given you brief explanation. The members of the Security Council are in provinces and in districts, and they are made up of individuals and that are known by everyone in the city. Except the head of the intelligence unit.
Although there is
اسامی
always
بجز
a
اسامی
head of the
واقعی
intelligence
خودشون دارن، یعنی از
on
اسم
the provincial
مستعار
security
استفاده
councils. Is
میکنن.
that fair?
Sorry, he was speaking at the same time as you. Would you mind repeating your question, please?
من ایشون بگن.
Could you repeat your question, because he was trying to speak simultaneously with you, and so I didn't hear your question. Could you repeat it, please?
Sure. My understanding is the names of the individuals on the various security councils That's information that's publicly available with the exception of the head of intelligence on a particular Security Council. That name would not be publicly available. Is that correct?
در
Precisely, yes, that's it.
Okay. But as to each Security Council, is there always someone who is head of intelligence on each Security Council?
These individuals are the principal members of the Security Council based on the law, and they must attend every session.
Okay. And you said something very interesting. If you remember, you said that when the protests began in 2019, that the Security Council met in particular area, and that the decisions that they made led to the atrocities that occurred. And I'm wondering if you could explain briefly what you meant by that. In other words, do they, in addition to the discussion about the judges, does that Security Council, for example, direct local police or the local military or any local militia to engage in certain activities? So I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm asking, what did you mean by that? What decisions were you referring to?
I already explained a bit in this regard. The Security Council, I explained what the Security Council did during those days. The Security Council follows a certain procedure. The Governor General or the Governor heads and chairs the Security Council. During those days, according to what I know, practically the governors and the governor generals only read out what the Ministry of Interior had asked them to read out. So in fact, the IRGC commander was managing the sessions, and the IRGC commanders were handling the meeting. The result were what happened that you have witnessed. You can see that the highest official of the country, the supreme leader, defended the IRGC and its practice towards the protesters when such a thing happens, and when it becomes clear that this Security Council and all the individuals are at the service of the IRGC, the security officials, then they act according to what they like. They say that we have weapons and we have a blank card to stop the protests in whatever way we want. The result of that and the result of the meetings of the Security Council meetings would have been what you have witnessed afterwards, and now it's become a part of the history. I believe that today's tribunal which has been held, and many more people could have testified here. I believe that in future courts in Iran, whoever participated in the Security Council and had a share, a part in the decision makings that led to the atrocities, should be tried in fair courts in future.
To focus on one aspect of this, and I think you're being very clear, actually, and thank you. But for example, when a Security Council met, and again, going back to the events that are the focus of this inquiry, would the discussion, for example, be detailed enough that someone could say, well, regardless of what Iranian law in theory holds, for purposes of dealing with these protests, we're going to put snipers on rooftops. You can shoot people above the waist. You can and we will use military-grade weapons. It doesn't matter, protesters are not armed. Would the discussion be that detailed? Or is it more of an assumption that IRGC or other groups have now just been given the green light to do as they choose, and they make their decisions individually on that level?
چون
The approvals of the Security Councils are being recorded, and they were recorded at the time too. The Security Council approvals are available in writing. In none of the Security Council meetings, never such a blank card is being given to security officials to shoot and kill. But there are some general orders issued. They say, for example, stop the protesters in whatever way possible. So that's a very general term used in the Security Council. In any way possible, in any form possible, gives an open hand to the IRGC officials and the intelligence officials to act as they like. And and also it gives a carte blanche to the security officials to enter people's houses. So this is a very general and extensive authority given to the officials, so they can do whatever they like. So they have an open hand to do whatever they want and to act in whatever manner they deem proper. So the individuals who were arrested, regardless of the fact that they were arrested while protesting or at home, their names were never published anywhere. Until later, after several days, they used to say that 200 people, 200 names are there. You can go and have a look, see whether the name of your child is among them or not. Later on, the court would have said that nothing has been referred to us, nobody's been sent to us. So this is how the arrests took place. The arrests were taken extrajudicially.
You remind me that this is really my last question here, which I think may put what you've just said in some perspective, at least for me. As you said that the Security Council had essentially lost its meaning. And could you explain what that means? And I'm sure you're referring, of course, to historically what the role of Security Council would be in an individual area. But you say it's lost its meaning. Can you give us a description of what you mean by that? How has it lost its meaning? Given what we are looking at now today.
اگه واقعیتش
If you want to know about the role, the true role of the Security Council, it is going to provide security to people. It's going to provide peace for the people. But when I say that it lost its meaning and its nature changed, I mean that those individuals who took part in the Security Council made some judicial decisions. They dictated certain things to the judges. They asked the judicial representative, how can we legally somehow bypass this? They were asking the members and the representatives how we can implement what we want. So rather than upholding security for the city, we see that the political deputy of the governor general or the governor who represented the government there, or the representative of the judicial representative who is the head of the justice system, or the IRGC commander, they all have their roles. Each of them within their own ambit of discussion would have presented their opinion. But in those days, no such discussions were being held. Nobody was allowed to express their opinion. Nobody was asked about their opinion about how to act, how it should be done, how the work should be done. If you ask a judge whether we can attack people's houses at night without any warrant, without violating the rights of people, so naturally the judge over there, even if he was a law student, would say that no, you cannot just enter people's houses without a warrant. But nobody asked and discussed such issues in the Security Council. They were just getting a carte blanche to do whatever they wanted. For example, they wanted to talk about the laws of use of the weapons. We have certain laws in this respect, from what distance you can use a weapon and what are the side laws. We have laws in every aspect of the issue, and they have relevance. But you see that the IRGC commander or the Basij commander, during those days when they were going to do their job in plain clothes, whether they were asked to observe any law at the time? They were only told to go and, in whatever way possible, to disperse these people, stop their protest. And even explicitly, they were told to use their weapons. If they are being provided with weapons, what are those weapons for? They are to be used.
Blanche, just as a last question, and to be fair, this came from the Ministry of the Interior on down. Am I correct about that?
Yes, it had come down from the Ministry of Interior in the form of a directive, and it was handed down as a form of a directive to all the provinces and cities. It was a carte blanche. It apparently seemed legal, but within itself, it led to a lot of atrocities.
It's been extremely informative. Thank you very much.
Ms. Firstman.
خواهش میکنم.
Thank you, and for your patience with the extensive questions that we have. It shows how interested we are in your testimony. I just have a few points for you. You had mentioned the challenge with respect to detention and detention of the protesters. And one of the comments that you made was that because these were rioters, there was a wide prerogative to detain. And it made me understand that because there were rioters involved, a different kind of law, different than the normal law for detention, was being used. Or was it because of the state of, was it an emergency situation which was at play, or was it given the comments made by my learned colleague, was it because of the directives from the security councils? So I'm just trying to understand what made the situation special from a legal point of view.
من خدمتتون عرض
First of all, I should say that there was no directive or no approval can act against the law. There could be no directive issued against the law of the country. Especially when we are talking of a peaceful protest. Unfortunately, under conditions when people had done nothing illegal, no such directive could be issued. Even the law has not allowed any action to be taken against people, even if they are not peaceful. The judges have the right to deal with illegal acts, even if the protests are not peaceful. This is while many people had not committed any crimes. Nowhere law was respected. I might be an individual who has broken some windows. Maybe I'm an individual who has gone to the crowd so that I would like to cause some unrest. Now I've been arrested. The judge, based on the level of my crime, can inform me of my charges and then issue a verdict and send me to prison. There is no permission under such conditions to act otherwise, to arrest me, take me to the court after a month without charging me, and treating me in whatever way they like during that month of arrest, and getting confessions, forced confessions from me during that 1 month and all that. Well, you know that how one person may kick someone and might kill someone even just by kicking someone.
Can I direct your attention to the story you recounted to us about the individual who was arrested by plainclothes officers? This is a story that was recounted to you, so not something that you saw directly, but on the basis of what was told to you, do you have any reason why that you can explain why your colleagues believed that the persons who arrested this young man were officials. They were in plain clothes. What made it clear that they were officials? You may not know the answer, but if you do, it would be helpful.
That's precisely the problem, and where lies the problem. These individuals are, it's not possible to identify these people. I wanted to say that based on Iran, we have two different people who are in charge. We have people who are public officials, who are the police, and then we have specific officials who are the forces from the intelligence agents of the intelligence ministry. And in the recent years, especially the IRGC intelligence. And in many cases, there are cases such as arson or even, or let's say, natural disasters. They sometimes, in rare cases, even naturally they use IRGC, but that's very rare. But it's very rare that they use their specific forces and military forces. But now you are saying these plainclothes men. Do we call them as this part of the specific force or the kind of public officers? Who are they? Where are they from? Did they receive, were they acting on some order from the authorities to come to the streets and stop the protests? No, these were Basijis, the militia. And they asked them to go there. And even if you'd go and ask a Revolutionary Guard, maybe he wouldn't know who these people were. Not these people were. It was only the commanders in the IRGC who knows about the identity of these plainclothes men. And that's why I'm saying it's very difficult to know who they are. Their identity is very, very secretive. Only even in the IRGC, the commanders know.
I can ask, just for clarification, how do we know that these plainclothes persons were Basiji?
Look, you know what the status quo is in our country. We know what the status quo is. We are familiar with these organizations. We know who the heads of these organizations like the Basij are. We know what they use, what measures they adopt, and we know what groups they use. The people know. The people are good at differentiating between these people. Maybe for a court, it might even be difficult to actually know these people. But the truth of the matter is the behavior and the conduct of these people is enough for the people in Iran. They have the mentality. They understand that these that it's the commanders, that these plainclothes officers must be receiving orders from high above. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that without these orders.
Thank you. That clarifies quite a bit. I have no further questions.
I've got nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Witness. And I think that's the end of the questions from the panel. Do you have any follow-up questions, Mr. Sabi?
No, sir. Thank you very much, Witness.
Mr. Witness, thank you very much for coming and answering all these questions and being so patient with us. We've all found, I think, your evidence very
ممنونم.
useful. And
متشکرم.
so
متشکرم.
thank you very much for taking the
من
time.
هم بابت
I likewise would like to, I appreciate your patience and I like to express my gratitude. Thank you.